Okay, so I got my paper actually in the car with me, so instead of typing all this out, I'll kind of go over how we get the 5 times the intensity. All right, so we have to find out what the intensity was for exposure 4 using the data from last week. Last week we had the recorded intensity when the KVP was 50 and the MAS was 10. This week we have we did an exposure where the KVP was 50, so the KVP was the same, and in the Cytocol room the MAS for exposure 4 would have been 50 because we used a 50 MA and a 1 second time. So that's 50 KVP and 50 MAS in the Cytocol room, right? So the only difference between the exposure that we did last week and exposure 4 this week is the MAS went up by 5 because the MAS from last week when the KVP was 50 was 10. So when the MAS is 50 instead of 10, that's 5 times 10, so that's 50, right? So that's where I get the 5 from. The intensity, the patient dose, is directly proportional to the MAS. So when the MAS increases by a factor of 5, the intensity increases by a factor of 5. So the exposures that we did last week was 50 KVP and 10 MAS, and then we got the intensity for that. So to find out the intensity for exposure 4 this week, which is 50 KVP, 50 MAS, we just multiply the intensity when the MAS was 10. If that intensity was 166 micrograys, then we multiply that by 5 because we multiplied the mass by 5, and then we should get, 830 or something like that micrograys. So that's where I got the 5 from.